Good afternoon to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. Greetings and welcome to the high-level seminar on gearing up the sustainable finance of developing nations, lessons for Sri Lanka, organized by Center for Banking Studies of Central Bank of Sri Lanka. We have now reached an era in which the sustainability is no longer an option, but a necessity. So to ensure sustainability, it's extremely important to make our financial systems greener and sustainable. So with that in mind, today we're going to discuss how we can gear up sustainable finance in developing countries like Sri Lanka. Having said that, let me have the pleasure of welcoming all of you who are joining with our high-level seminar today from all over the country via Zoom and Facebook. For delivering the keynote address of this high-level seminar, we have invited Dr. Ma Jun, Chairman, Green Finance Committee of China Society for Finance and Banking. We warmly welcome you, Doctor. Following Dr. Ma's keynote address, we will commence our discussion with the participation of our esteemed panelists. Today's panel consists of Mrs. W.A. Dilushini, Director, Macroprudential Surveillance Department of Central Bank of Sri Lanka, and Dr. Suspit Sugatapala, Senior Lecturer in Mechanical Engineering at the University of Moratuwa in Sri Lanka, and Ms. Sushara Vidyasagara, Head of Investment Banking, Commercial Bank, PLC, and Mr. Dhanuji Jayapala, Deputy General Manager, Environmental Sustainability from Mars Capital. And the moderation of the panel discussion will be done by Ms. Dushan Ranasinghe, Senior Assistant Director of Macroprudential Surveillance Department of Central Bank of Sri Lanka. We welcome all of you with great honor. And as previously mentioned, we are pleased to have a substantial virtual audience today. So our viewers have two avenues to engage with the session interactively. Firstly, through the Q&A feature on Zoom, and secondly, by posting comments on the Facebook live stream. So we encourage all of you to engage with the session as much as possible. So now, without taking much time, let's commence the session. At this point, we are joined by Mrs. T.M.J.Y.P. Fernando, Senior Deputy Governor of Central Bank of Sri Lanka. While welcoming her with respect for today's high-level seminar, let me now invite Senior Deputy Governor to deliver opening remarks for the session and also to introduce Dr. Ma to the audience. Over to you, Madam.
Thank you, Kushan. Good afternoon. Good day to all of you. I'm pleased to deliver the opening remarks for the high-level seminar on gearing up the sustainable finance of developing nations, lessons for Sri Lanka. This seminar has been thoughtfully organized by the Center for Banking Studies, the esteemed training arm of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. We believe that this topic is particularly timely for Sri Lanka, considering the significant progress the country has made in implementing sustainable finance initiatives over the past few years. To elaborate further, in the year 2016, Sri Lanka submitted its initial commitment to the Paris Agreement and launched the National Adaptation Plan to conduct climate change. Sri Lanka officially embarked on its sustainable finance journey in the same year after joining the Sustainable Banking and Finance Network, SBFN, of the International Finance Corporation, which is well known as IFC. Let me now share how Central Bank of Sri Lanka has progressed in this regard. In 2019, the Central Bank launched the first ever roadmap for sustainable finance in the country with the assistance of IFC and United Nations Development Programme, UNDP. In 2022, the Central Bank released the Green Finance Taxonomy with the assistance of IFC and several other consultants. This taxonomy covers green and blue aspects of finance. Further, the Central Bank issued a direction to the banking sector and guidelines to the licensed finance companies on reporting sustainable finance activities of the respective institutions. More recently, Central Bank formed a panel of experts to address the queries related to the Green Finance Taxonomy from the financial institutions. Sri Lanka became a member of the International Platform for Sustainable Finance, which we also call as IPSF, as the 20th member in July 2023. Sri Lanka's green finance taxonomy was developed based on IPSF's common ground taxonomy, which is harmonized between European and Chinese taxonomies. Moreover, the Ministry of Finance, in consultation with United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, UNESCAP, developed a sovereign bond framework for the issuance of green bonds. Parallelly, the Securities and Exchange Commission joined hands with the Asian Development Bank, ADB, in developing a corporate green bond issuing framework for the Colombo Stock Exchange. Although much of the infrastructure is being developed, there is much more left to be done in terms of synchronizing the climate agenda and financial sector contribution towards achieving its goals. The recently released measurement framework for sustainable finance roadmaps by SBF and IFC states that Sri Lanka is still in the developing stage, while certain contemporary nations have moved to advancing stage in terms of implementation. Therefore, it is crucial to understand what is required to gear up the sustainable finance journey amidst the challenging economic conditions prevailing both domestically and externally, as well as to recognize how we as a nation could align our financial sector sustainability goals in line with the Paris Agenda. We hope that this high-level seminar will shed some light on this. So, now let me introduce the keynote speaker today, Dr. Ma Jud, to all of you. Dr. Ma is currently the president of the Institute of Finance and Sustainability, chairman of Green Finance Committee of China Society for Finance and Banking, co-chair of IPSF Working Group of Sustainable Finance Taxonomy, chairman of Hong Kong Green Finance Association, president of Beijing Green Finance Association, a board member of the Integrity Council of Voluntary Carbon Market, a member of China's Carbon Neutrality Technology Expert Group, a member of Hong Kong's Council for Carbon Neutrality and Sustainable Development, and a co-organizer of the China's US Track 2 Climate Finance Dialogue. He co-chairs on behalf of China, the China-UK, the China-EU, the China-France, and China-Singapore Green Finance Collaborative Initiatives. Between 2016 and 2022, Dr. Ma served as the co-chair of G20 Sustainable Finance Working Group, formerly G20 Green Finance Study Group. Between 2018 and 2021, Dr. Ma was member of the Monetary Committee of the People's Bank of China, and between 2014 and 2017, he was the chief economist at the People's Bank of China and initiated China's Green Finance Policy Framework. Before joining the People's Bank of China, he worked for 13 years at Deutsche Bank, where he was managing director, chief economist, investment strategist for Greater China. During 1992 to 2000, he worked as a senior economist and economist at the World Bank and the IMF, working largely on development issues. Dr. Ma is a leading advocate and practitioner of green finance and sustainable development. In 2015 to 16, he led the development of China's green finance guidelines and China's first green bond standard. Since 2016, he played a key role in developing a range of global consensus on scaling up sustainable finance under the G20 framework. In the past years, he initiated the green investment principles of the Belt and Road and co-chaired the IPSF work that produced the Common Ground Taxonomy, which helps improve the interoperability and consistency of green definitions across jurisdictions. In the context of Sri Lankan sustainable finance journey, Dr. Ma has been on the advisory panel for developing the Sri Lanka Green Finance Taxonomy, and he also made his remarks at the launching of the taxonomy in 2022. Dr. Ma received his PhD in economics from Georgetown University in 1994 and his master's degree in management science from the Fulton University in 1988. He received his numerous awards for his achievements in promoting green finance, ESG, and sustainability. So I think we have the best person who could take up today's high-level seminar and most suited to take up the given topic. So I warmly welcome Dr. Majud and also thank you for accepting our invitation. And with that introduction, let me cordially invite Dr. Majud to commence the keynote speech.
Thank you very much, Deputy Governor. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes, very well.
Great. Can I ask how much time do I have for my keynote?
We can go like 45 minutes.
I'm sorry?
45 minutes, Doctor.
45? Okay, that's pretty long, but
okay.
Let me try. Well, let me start by thanking the Central Bank of Sri Lanka for inviting me to join this important seminar on sustainable finance, and also my great appreciation for the Central Bank for inviting me to join its earlier work on Sri Lanka Green Taxonomy, which was a very major step towards setting up the system. Now, in the coming maybe 30, 40 minutes, I'd like to cover two aspects of the topic on green sustainable finance. One is the green financial system in China, which I personally was kicking off the journey back almost 10 years ago. And I want to draw some lessons for Sri Lanka in the form of what I call framework and the 4 pillars. Then I switch on the second the broad topic of global trends under the heading of transition finance, ISSB, disclosure standard, common ground taxonomy, and also capacity building. So let me start with my first broad topic of the green financial system with 4 pillars, using China as a case for illustration. I started working on the proposal for setting up a Chinese green financial system in 2013. And the second year, which is 2014, I had the pleasure to become the chief economist of the PBOC, namely the central bank. And at that time, I set up a working group within the central bank. And we spent roughly half a year to propose 14 actions to the central government on setting up what we call green financial system, which means that it goes beyond a single product of green loan and needs coordination between many policymakers. So under that idea, we spent 1.5 years and put together a green financial system guideline organized jointly by 7 ministries. And that was published in 2016. And it was a joint product of 7 ministries, including the central bank, the banking regulator, the securities regulator, the NDRC, which is the sort of the overall planner of economy, and the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Environmental and Ecology. I describe the key elements of this green financial system into what I call 4 pillars. The first pillar is taxonomy, and the second pillar is disclosure. The third pillar is financial products, and the fourth pillar is incentives. And these different pillars, they work with each other, and they complement to each other, and they eventually will form an ecosystem that allow the financial institutions within the ecosystem to mobilize a huge amount of financing for the green economic activities. So starting with the first pillar, namely the taxonomy, we actually now have 3 taxonomies in China. The first one was a very, very simple one, launched in 2013 by the banking regulator. It was as simple as 1-pager. It's a 1-pager document of 12 different lines. And that kind of taxonomy was useful, but it was not very useful because it only shows really the heading of the type of activities, but it doesn't go into the technical details to allow the bankers to label specific activities in a precise way. So just by using that 1-pager, we ended up with a lot of inaccurate labeling of activities. And then we moved on to the second taxonomy, which I personally led in drafting in 2015. That was called the Green Bond Taxonomy. And we expanded the list to a 10-page document with 31 categories. And in some of the categories, we put on very specific criteria and thresholds using quantitative targets. So that taxonomy became much more useful. And a lot of organizations use that taxonomy to label the economic activities and the green bonds issued for these activities. The third taxonomy was produced in 2019. It consolidated the previous taxonomies, different works, and it was organized jointly by 7 ministries again, including the central bank. And that taxonomy was as long as 60 pages, including 211 categories of activities, with a lot more details of descriptions and conditions and thresholds and so on. Now, broadly speaking, we now cover all major areas of green activities in the 2019 taxonomy, which includes renewable energy, green building, green transportation, green manufacturing, nature-related solutions, and all that. And the taxonomies are used in several different ways. For example, the current version of the green loan taxonomy, green bonds taxonomy, are used to label these products. And these products are also reported to the regulators. For example, the central bank requires the banks to report how much green loans you extend every year and what is the outstanding amount of green loans. And also the regulators, actually quite a few of them, including central bank security regulators, require the bond issuers to report the green bond related information, including outstanding amount, the flows and so on. And all of these issuers are also required to report the environmental benefits based on the taxonomy. For example, how much carbon you have reduced in number of tons you have to report, and how much SO2 and NOx, which is the measure of air pollution you have reduced, you need to report as an issuer. So it's used, let me repeat, as a way to label financial products, to measure environmental benefits, and to report these benefits, and also use it to allocate incentives. For example, some of the local governments, including the green pilot regions like Huzhou municipality, they actually give interest subsidies based on the green labeled product. If you have a larger volume of green loans, then this bank will get more subsidy for interest payments. So all of these are actual usage of taxonomy. The main sort of underlying reason for us to use taxonomy is actually to prevent greenwashing. Because if you don't have official taxonomy, then a lot of issuers and even financial institutions will claim the activities they are launching or they're supporting will be green. But we have no way to verify clearly whether these claimed activities are indeed green and developing environmental benefits. Therefore, a official taxonomy can provide a basis for the second party verification, which can certainly help reduce the risk of greenwashing. Now, moving on to the second pillar of disclosure. It's a process that evolved over time. Initially in 2015-16, when we just launched the green bond standards, we asked the green bond issuers to report environmental benefits not just to the central bank, to regulators, but also to the markets, namely the market participants. The investors need to know how much environmental benefits you are generating. And then in 2017, the Ministry of Environment in China, they came with a requirement, which is mandatory, to ask all major polluters in the economy, including a lot of listed companies, to disclose environmental information in a mandatory way. Roughly 20% of the listed companies are classified as major polluter because the amount of pollution, amount of emissions of carbon are above certain threshold. Then these companies will have to disclose the environmental information, including the impact of activity on the environment and also the green activities they undertake and these green activities environmental benefits. Then we gradually move on to a disclosure of ESG related information. The recent effort by the CSRC, the securities regulator, and also the PBOC, the central bank, are now asking the listed companies and also the financial institutions to disclose more broadly based environmental information. And the reference is TCFD. Of course, the current version of the ESG disclosure requirements are not detailed enough and they're not mandatory yet. But we are now moving towards a new system, which will be based on ISSB. That's a topic I'll be talking slightly later. And the third pillar of the green financial system in China is what we call a suite of products. We realize that financial products need to be diversified so that we can meet many different kinds of demand from the green economy. Some green companies and green projects need relatively short-term financing. Some requires longer-term financing. Some probably need insurance of insurance-like risk mitigation products. So we need to have a system of many products, including green loans, green bonds, green equity funds, green insurance products, guarantee facilities, and so on and so forth. So over the past 8 years since we published the green financial guidelines, we now have developed the world's largest green lending market. Our green loans now amount to 27 trillion RMB in outstanding amount. And our green bonds outstanding is about 1.7 trillion RMB, ranking the second largest green bond market in the world. And also we developed some equity products in the form of PEVC funds for green activities. So far, I think we have launched more than 1,000 green funds in China. Of course, there are many other more innovative products, such as the green ETF, green ABS, green insurance products, and so on and so forth. The latest development is actually a carbon market, and there's some products that's relating carbon to financial services. For example, some companies that received the allocation from the government of carbon quotas, they use carbon quota as collateral to borrow from the bank and can reduce the borrowing cost. And some companies that can generate carbon credit, for example, the forestry projects, and they're using future income from selling these carbon credit as collateral to borrow from the bank or from the bond market, thereby also lowering their funding cost. Now moving on to the fourth major pillar of the green financial system, that's what I call the policy incentives. The reason we need to allocate incentives is that in the early stage, many green activities may not be making money, which means that the ROE is not high enough to attract private sector investments. But we at the government level strongly believe that these activities will generate a lot of environmental benefits, and this is what we want. So we want to provide some incentive to enable these projects become more bankable, meaning that improving their profitability, at least outlook of future profitability, so that we can attract private sector money, including from the banking system, from capital markets, from PEVC, to participate in these activities. Now, in the past, we have applied different kinds of incentives to green projects. Within the financial system, the central bank in China produced a facility, which is called decarbonization facility. And this facility offers low-cost funding through commercial banks to the green projects which are qualified. We're actually allocating this facility not to all green projects, but to a subset of green projects out of the taxonomy. This subset involves about 20 activities, largely in the area of renewable, such as wind and solar, biomass, and so on, and also in industrial decarbonization, such as energy efficiency projects, and also in the area of CCUS. In the last few years, this facility offered, I think, a few hundred billion RMB through commercial banks to the green projects, and substantially lower the funding cost of some of the projects, especially renewables. And indeed, I think the green financial products, along with the incentives, fueled the very, very rapid development of some of the green segment of the Chinese economy, including China now has the largest renewable capacity and the largest electric vehicle production, and also the largest battery industry. All of this, I think, benefited from the green financial products as well as the incentives supporting them. Not just the central bank providing incentive, but also at the local government level, we encourage them to be innovative and using their local resources to encourage and incentivize green investment. Back in 2017, when I was still in the central bank, I was organizing the local green finance pilot program. We launched 8 regional pilot cities, and now we have more. But at that time, one of the first pilot city is Huzhou municipality, close to Shanghai, and they're now becoming the model for green finance in China. And in this particular city, the city government came up with many different incentives, including, for example, interest subsidies for green loans. They actually classified the green projects into 3 different types. One is called dark green or deep green. The second one is called green. And the third one is called light green. And for different types of green projects, they offer different levels of incentive in the form of interest subsidies. For the dark green one, they offer 12% subsidy for interest payments. For the green one, they offer 9% interest subsidy. And for the light green one, they offer 6% interest subsidy, which means that for the dark green ones, 12% of the interest payments are paid by the government. And the private sector only need to pay the remaining 88% of the total interest. So that policy, I think, actually was very effective. In this city, we observed a rapid and consistent growth of green finance. And they were reporting something like 40% growth of green loans every year since 2017. And they actually kept the non-performing loan ratio at 0.4%. So very high quality growth of the green economy with much lower risk than peers in other regions. Of course, there are many other incentives. For example, a lot of local governments are offering subsidies or grants for the companies to conduct green verification. Essentially, they are saying if you want a third-party verifier to serve your labeling exercise, I can pay for you. The government can pay for you. So this happens in most of the Chinese green pilot region, and also happened in Hong Kong special administration. Now moving on probably to my second broad topic on some of the global trends in green sustainable finance. As a deputy governor introduced, I used to be the co-chair of the G20 Sustainable Finance Working Group until beginning of this year. And also I still co-chair the IPSF taxonomy working group that produced a common ground taxonomy. And I was deeply involved in NGFS that produced the climate risk analysis methodologies. So I'll say a few words on some of the major trends which are identified or called upon by these international bodies. The first big trend is transition finance. Now, previously, we talked a lot about the green finance, sustainable finance, but the focus of these initiatives are largely on financing pure green activities, which, for example, include renewable energy, electric vehicles, battery, and so on. Now, these economic activities, when we consider their emissions at the operational stage, it's very, very low. And some of them are actually close to zero emission. That's why we call them pure green activities. But the carbon intensive sectors, such as steel, cement, petrochemical, paper making, mining sector, transportation, and building sector, they have not received enough financial support from the green and sustainable financial system. And a major reason is that green and sustainable finance, typically in many countries, they are based on a green taxonomy. And green taxonomy listed most of the pure green activities and have not listed enough of the transition activities in carbon intensive sectors. That's why G20 back 2 years ago began to focus on this issue and calling for setting up a transition finance framework to guide more private sector capital to support decarbonization activities of carbon intensive sectors, namely the transition activities. So personally, I was spending a lot of time last year organizing the drafting of the G20 transition finance framework. And this framework was published in November last year during the Bali summit of the G20 leaders. And it was endorsed by the G20 leaders. Now, this transition framework, again, has 5 pillars. I will briefly mention them. Number one, we need to have an approach or some approaches to identify transition activities. And in the case of China and Europe, and probably many other countries, this approach involves a transition taxonomy, which means that a big table listing the qualified transition activities under the headings of major carbon intensive sectors, such as steel, cement, petrochemical, and so on. And this big table can be as long as 10 pages. In fact, in the case of Huzhou municipality, they came up with a transition taxonomy already back a few months ago. It was a 10-page document involving 106 transition activities, which the government of Huzhou believe are credible transition activities. Now, having this taxonomy will help reduce the identification cost from both the investor and also the corporate perspective. Otherwise, you have to invite probably a very expensive third-party service provider to do an assessment of your proposed activity and label them as qualified transition activity. And typically, such third-party service is more expensive than most of the small medium enterprises can afford. That's why a taxonomy approach, in our view, at least in the China case, is quite desirable. And the central bank in China is also working on a nationwide transition taxonomy, which now in the draft form include the 4 sectors. That's coal-fired power generation, steel, cement, and agriculture. The second pillar of the G20 transition finance framework is called disclosure of transition activities. Now, this disclosure is quite different from the disclosure requirement imposed on pure green activities. For pure green activity, for example, launching a renewable project, it's a rather static exercise. You basically need to tell by launching this renewable like solar and wind, how much carbon, how much pollution you can reduce relative to a benchmark, which is probably a coal-fired power generation. This is what we call a photo like disclosure. It's a snapshot or static disclosure. But a transition activity typically lasts for decades. And you have to tell, as the companies organizing the transition activities, what you are going to do in the coming 20, 30 years to move from the current level of carbon emission gradually towards net zero. And in the middle, maybe in 2 years' time, 5 years' time, 7 years' time, how much carbon you want to reduce, and what are technologies you will employ, and what are the investment projects you will launch. So it's a movie. And this disclosure is a movie-like disclosure requirement, which is much more complex than a static disclosure requirement. Therefore, in the G20 framework, we're asking the transition companies to disclose information, including the scope 1, 2, 3 emission data, including a credible transition plan involving short-term, medium-term, long-term targets, and including a governance arrangement on how you're going to implement the transition plan in a credible way. The third pillar of the transition finance framework produced by G20 is about financial products. So far, we have seen some transition products in the form of debt or loans. These are typically called sustainability linked loans and bonds, and other are just called transition bonds and loans. But we also need many other forms of transition products, especially in the form of equity, in the form of risk mitigation products, so that we can serve all kinds of needs from the transition sectors. And the fourth pillar is, again, the incentives. We strongly believe that the incentives that's given to transition activities are just not enough. In many countries, we have given a lot of incentive to pure green activities already, and we made them now very bankable, and we can remove these incentives already. But for many transition activities, they are still in the stage of facing a lot of difficulties in getting financing, and that's why the incentive in the form of fiscal, monetary, regulatory help, I think, is more important than the pure green activities. And finally, the need to consider just transition, because transition activities may very often involve laying off people, employees from the sectors that are seeing decline in demand and shutting down their operation. And therefore, the social impact needs to be considered, not only by the government, by the social security system, but also by the investors, the lenders, and also the financial regulators. This is especially true in developing country emerging markets, where the fiscal capacity and the social security system are not mature enough to provide the cushion for the social shock due to transition. And that's why the G20 is asking the financial regulators and also financial institutions to be involved in producing financial products that care about or take into account the just transition elements. For example, a typical financial institutions arranging a transition financial product for a corporate should ask a question of, in your transition plan, can you assess the impact on employment, which means that are you going to lay off a lot of employees? If the answer is yes, can you consider putting some retraining and reskilling program as part of the transition plan? If so, my financial institution may actually be incentivizing you by offering a slightly lower funding cost for your operation. So that's what the G20 is asking, and some of the countries and the financial institutions are now practicing this consideration in their structuring of financial products for transition. Now, let me just quickly say a few words on ISSB. This is a global standard setting body launched about 2 years ago. And the goal of International Sustainability Standard Board, or ISSB, is to establish a global baseline for sustainability related reporting. The backdrop is that there have been too many reporting standards on ESG, on green, on sustainability, and it's been very confusing for many investors and banks, especially those managing international portfolio involving companies from 30 different countries. If each country has a different reporting standards, most of the data collected from these standards are not comparable, not interoperable. It will increase the transaction costs and recognition costs and probably increase greenwashing risks. That's why a new global initiative, which ISSB, was launched. And now ISSB has produced the first 2 standards. It's called S1 and S2. Back a few months ago, they're pushing for adoption by different country authorities. And I'm quite positive on the future of ISSB. And I believe that with the efforts of ISSB and also its Beijing office, which is designed to promote ISSB adoption in developing country emerging markets, we will see many countries eventually adopt ISSB as the main building block of their disclosure standards, so that we can enhance interoperability of the domestic reporting with the international reporting standards. Now, just one word on common ground taxonomy, which was mentioned by Deputy Governor earlier, and it was a basis for Sri Lanka's green taxonomy. The latest trend is that this common ground taxonomy will expand its scope and also country basis. By scope, we mean that the current version of common ground taxonomy that covers only 72 mitigation activities will gradually expand coverage to include activities in the sector of pollution control, nature-related solutions, and also circular economy. And in terms of country, we mean that some other countries have applied to join the CGT. Indeed, early this year, Singapore has raised its hand, and we agreed to include Singapore as a country basis of the next version of CGT. So after some time, when we produce maybe the third version of CGT, it will be a joint work between EU and China and Singapore. And finally, just one word on capacity building. I think last 10 years, we made a lot of progress in green sustainable finance globally, but still a lot of developing countries and emerging market economies are yet to catch up by setting up a more complete system for green finance. And a key bottleneck for these economies is capacity. Therefore, the G20 is calling for strengthened capacity building efforts by international organizations, by NGOs, and by the financial sector in general. And to respond to that G20 call, my team at the Institute of Finance Sustainability based in Beijing is now organizing a coalition, which is called CASI. The full name of this initiative is called Capacity Building Alliance of Sustainable Investment. And we're planning to organize something like 50 members, institutions, to jointly deliver capacity building services to developing country emerging markets in the coming few years. And I'm hopeful that our colleagues in Sri Lanka and in the region will work with CASI, and probably we can think about jointly hosting some events targeting the audience that you are interested. So with that, let me thank once again the Central Bank of Sri Lanka for inviting me, and I wish today's seminar a great success. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for that insightful speech. We sincerely appreciate your presence today, especially considering your demanding schedule. So thank you very much for joining, Doctor. So with that, it's time for the panel discussion to begin. This discussion will be moderated by Mr. Dushan Ranasinghe. Mr. Dushan is currently heading Sustainable Finance Division attached to the Macroprudential Surveillance Department of Central Bank of Sri Lanka, which acts as a secretariat for the implementation of the Sustainable Finance Roadmap in Sri Lanka. He also serves as a member of the Technical Committee on the implementation of the roadmap. He has represented the central bank in various knowledge sharing forums in the area of sustainable finance, both at the national and international levels, and contributed to national level committees in developing policy frameworks on sustainable development activities. With that introduction, controls are now with Dushan. Dushan, over to you.
Thank you, Kushan. Hope you can hear me enough.
Yes, very well.
Correct. So thank you for that kind introduction, and thank you for having me to moderate this panel discussion. In fact, I consider it as an honor and a privilege. So as you previously introduced, so we have a diverse representation on the panel today. And first of all, thank you very much for accepting our invitations and be on the panel. So all the four panelists today. So we have a coverage from financial sector regulations, academia, banking sector, and industry sector. So please allow me to formally introduce the panelists in the order of questions in the first round. So first, I will start with Ms. W.A. Dilrukshini. Ms. Dilrukshini is the Director of Macroprudential Surveillance Department of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. She has served in the CBSL for over 23 years in different capacities. She served as an economist, senior economist, deputy director, and also an additional director of the Economic Research Department before taking over the Macroprudential Surveillance Department. She was instrumental in developing the Sustainable Finance Roadmap and the Green Finance Taxonomy for Sri Lanka. She's currently functioning the Secretariat for Implementation of Sustainable Finance Roadmap and the Stakeholder Committee on Implementation of the Roadmap for Sustainable Finance in Sri Lanka. We are happy to have you, Madam, on the panel. And next, we're moving to Dr. Tusitha Sugathapala. Dr. Sugathapala is a senior lecturer in mechanical engineering at the University of Moratuwa and a chartered engineer. He obtained the BSc engineering degree from University of Moratuwa and PhD from University of Cambridge. He served as the Director General of Sri Lanka Sustainable Energy Authority from 2011 to 2015. He has served several national level committees and involved with development of policies and regulations related to energy, transport and environment sectors and sustainable development. He is a member of the National Expert Committee on Climate Change Mitigation and has been involved with several national level interventions, including development of policy and strategy on sustainable development, National Environment Action Plan, nationally determined NDCs, very well known as the NDCs, and its implementation plan, Green Finance Taxonomy, which was developed by CBSL, and the SDG Investor Map. Presently, he is involved with the development of carbon trading strategy, national electric mobility policy, and climate smart green growth strategy for Sri Lanka. Not to forget, he's the chairman of the expert panel recently formed by the central bank in addressing the queries related to the green finance taxonomy. We are happy to have you on the panel, sir. And next, we have Ms. Sushara Vidyasagara. Ms. Sushara is the head of investment banking at Commercial Bank of Ceylon PLC. Having joined the bank as a management trainee, she has vast experience in many aspects of banking. She was involved in setting up the corporate finance operations at Commercial Bank and counts over 20 years of experience in corporate finance and capital markets. She also has extensive experience in project financing with a particular focus in the power sector. Sushara is also an advocate of sustainability and provides leadership to green financing at Commercial Bank and has been involved in Commercial Bank's green journey from its inception. Ms. Sushara, we are happy to have you on the panel for today. And next, last but not least, Mr. Danuji Jayapala. Danuji Jayapala is the head of environmental sustainability within the sustainable business team at MAS Capital. He has been engaged in this space for over 12 years, working primarily on energy efficiency, renewable energy, and decarbonization. Danuji is a graduate of the Faculty of Engineering, University of Peradeniya, and holds an MBA from the University of Wolverhampton. He qualified as a project management professional in 2018 and is a PMP certified project manager. He's currently following his master's in sustainable development at the University of Sussex. Danuji is currently a member of HIG Product Tools Strategic Council of the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, known as SAC, and a member of the Consumer Consultative Committee of PUCSL. In his current role at MAS, Danuji is focused on achieving the company's environmental targets aligned, including decarbonization, to its sustainability strategy, the MAS plan for change. So with those formal introductions, let me give a little bit on the structure of the panel discussion. So we will be having 2 rounds. First round will be direct questions to each panelist. And second round, I'll be posing a general question to all the panelists to answer based on their area of expertise. And then the floor will be open for Q&A. So first of all, let me turn to the central bank. So we've been listening to Dr. Ma's insightful discussion, keynote speech. So as highlighted by Dr. Ma, disclosure requirements, taxonomy, policy incentives, and capacity buildings are 4 main areas that he touched upon. So as the central bank, what changes to the regulations and disclosure requirements to the financial sector will ensure the economy will gain from financing the sustainable business activities? And secondly, what sort of policy incentives could be offered to the financial sector in motivating the financiers to popularize sustainable products? This question is directed to Ms. W.A. Dirukshini to start off the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dushan. Dr. Ma and the Senior Deputy Governor, Mrs. Fernando, I think they sets the background for my discussion points. So as Mrs. Fernando said, the central bank having two mandates, which is price stability and the financial system stability, as climate change affects these both statutory objectives. We took some initiatives for the central bank's involvement towards sustainability. So we started with greening the economy, where we launched the roadmap for sustainable finance in Sri Lanka, which is a strategic framework where all stakeholders, financial sector stakeholders came on board, and we all agreed, and we set up our actions in the roadmap. Basically to effectively manage environmental, social, and governance risk, to make the environmentally friendly and socially inclusive country. The Sri Lanka Green Taxonomy was our next step. The framework is a must for any country. So the framework is roadmap. Then, as Dr. Ma said, the 4 pillars of green finance system, the first pillar is taxonomy. So we developed the taxonomy, again, with the technical and financial assistance we received from IFC, plus from some insights coming from local experts like Dr. Sugitapala. And then this taxonomy, as Dr. Ma very clearly mentioned, that was to stop greenwashing. So when you get the taxonomy in place, we as a regulator, our next step, was to ensure that economy gains from financing sustainable business activities. So we introduced few regulations and disclosure requirements, because disclosure is a must when you are going for sustainable financing. So in June 2022, in line with the taxonomy, the central bank issued the Direction on Sustainable Finance Activities of Licensed Banks. This directive identified priority sectors for lending and mandates compliance with the Sri Lanka Green Finance Taxonomy. This taxonomy, it encourages innovation in sustainable finance instruments and provides governance and risk management guidance for banks. Importantly, I would say it outlines disclosure and reporting requirements for banks, including data collection on exposure to sustainable finance projects. This data, of course, is vital for the central bank to monitor and assess the extent to which banks are engaging in sustainable finance activities, which is crucial for the regulatory oversight plus policy making. Then I would say such data provides insights into economic gain, which would be generated from financing sustainable business activities. Then I think non-banking sector, LFC sector participants know that we extended a similar guideline to the LFC sector, demonstrating our comprehensive approach to regulating sustainable finance in the financial sector. Looking ahead, the central bank intends to expand this reporting requirement into more comprehensive framework, further enhancing transparency and accountability. So these policy initiatives are very important, and to facilitate the sector, we very recently set up an expert group who can answer the questions related to taxonomy, because the market is still adjusting to the taxonomy. Then the taxonomy, I believe, what we introduce will serve, as Dr. Ma very clearly said, as a second party verification tool. And then the next question that you asked me, Dushan, it's a question which is very difficult to answer at this point because, you know, as Dr. Ma said, out of 4 pillars, we have the taxonomy, we have the disclosure and financial products. I think we are doing the capacity development for the financial sector to come up with new financial products, some innovative products. Then the 4th pillar is incentive. I understand that we have to incentivize the financial sector to get the maximum benefit out of these frameworks or the policies that we have introduced. However, we all know, as Dr. Ma very clearly said, these incentives have come from governments and interest subsidies, tax breaks. But we all know we have been very, very unfortunate, and the fiscal space that we have at the moment to incentivize sustainable finance is very, very limited. And then come to, if the central bank is to introduce, the refinancing scheme or an interest subsidy scheme, that is also not very, very easy. And at the moment, I know that there are some international agencies coming up with some facilities. So that is the way forward for us to get some facility, obtain some facility, and then the banking sector to disburse such facilities. But as Dr. Ma said, monetary or fiscal incentives are difficult at the moment. The scope is there for some regulatory incentive, which we are at the moment discussing at the central bank, some kind of regulatory forbearance to incentivize green financing. I think we will explore. At the moment we are exploring. So there will be some incentives for the financial sector, especially for banks, to incentivize. I think, Dushan, I answered your question.
Yes, madam. So that will be a good news for the financiers, especially the banking sector. So even though we are in a tight situation when it comes to fiscal environment, so still the central bank is considering the regulatory incentives that will be possible in the capacity that we have. So that will be in time to come. So with that message, I'll be moving on to our next panelist, Dr. Sugathapala, who's not a stranger to this discussion, especially with the relationship with the central bank. So Dr. Sugathapala is an academic and a pioneer who was engaged in designing Sri Lanka Green Finance Taxonomy, and as the chairman of the expert panel formed by CBSL. How would you stress upon having a well-articulated taxonomy for the advancement of sustainable financing in the country? And what are the key factors to be looked at when building capacities in the area of sustainability across multiple disciplines in the economy?
Yeah, thank you, Dushan, and thank you very much for allowing me to contribute to this discussion. I'm also learning a lot now through these discussions with the international participation too. So I want to just bring some of the key, I think, aspects which need to be understood when we talk this topic on sustainable financing, especially taxonomy. Remember that what we have presently in Sri Lanka is the green finance taxonomy. So then we have what we call sustainable finance taxonomy, which look into the broader context beyond the environment, going into social and governance aspect, ESG. So, but when you look at our the green finance taxonomy, the framework itself is a common thing. Like basically, we can understand the soundness of this framework. That's a key, because what we do here is basically for reality. That's why even greenwashing term came up. That now the targets we have globally as well as locally are real targets in reality, because otherwise we face multiple challenges. SDGs, now we have 2030 targets. Remember that SDGs are, of course, a global framework. It's been localized, so we have local targets. That's something probably some are not really aware. So we have localized it, Sustainable Council. So therefore, I think all of us should know these local targets also, the targets as well as the indicators, where anything we do, both financial and industrial sector should look into that and align our activities and also set these targets, the local, the institution level targets, or even the indicators towards this national thing. Other one, of course, much spoken one is the climate change issue. So we have national determined contribution. Again, we have 2030 targets set now for different sectors. I think most of the economic sectors are there. We have both mitigation and adaptation, and also we have loss and damage. So there are multiple areas where any of your topic is, in fact, directly or indirectly there. So we should understand those also. And more importantly, now we have kind of a long-term target of carbon neutrality, net zero by 2050. It is now being stressed by the government more and more. So that is another area which all these targets need a more comprehensive framework for us to monitor the progress and have a dynamic roadmaps to achieve those targets. So in that context, the green finance taxonomy or even sustainable finance taxonomy in the future will play the part. So there is it should be very sound, foolproof, methodical framework. So therefore it's complex. And we look at our green finance taxonomy, the way it's presented is based on a global framework. We use what you call the international, the standard classification of industries, or industrial classification. And so that's the macro level. And then we go into the activities within that. There are many 500 plus such activities are listed globally, as well as has been localized by the Department of Census and Statistics. We can find the local, the industrial classification. So therefore, the sustainable financing or the green financing taxonomies are evolved through this framework. So therefore, everyone should understand that framework also, because sometimes you see that some of the important activities which should be there in our taxonomy is in fact not there. So therefore, question comes, why it's not there? There are two reasons. One thing is the way we prioritize, in fact, globally or even locally, is by looking at the macro sectors. There are many macro sectors which are classified on this taxonomy, the industry classification, based on the feedback from our the stakeholders, the government ministries and the agencies during this development process. Not all, but some of the sectors like agriculture, energy, likewise we prioritize, and then we go into activities under that. So you might find that some of the activities which are important, but not in a particular, prioritized macro sector. So that is missing at present. But remember that this is a dynamic the framework, so that at any time we can, regularly we can update it and look into that. That's one thing. Secondly, I think this is the most important thing. To qualify for this taxonomy, we need to have a data and also tool to monitor, report, and verify. So that's the major gap we have. Some of the very important sectors, projects, or the products we could not put into the taxonomy as at present because we don't have the data. One example is, for example, electric vehicles. So the performance of electric vehicle on the ground, we don't have data yet. So therefore it will come in the future. So it's a must that there's some very important aspect. We have to generate data. We have to have data to support the progress and also monitor and so on. So, and also we have to have a system to monitor or quantify or test. Now, for example, if we bring up a solar panel, locally we don't have testing facility to prove the efficiency. So what we do there is we go by international certification. and look at that certificate, and then sustainability authority will qualify it. But ideally, we have to have a local facility to prove it. So therefore, some of the cases like solar panel, of course, when we have international certification, that's sufficient. But some of the things like even electric vehicles, when it's run in our own road, the way it's drive and the other conditions will change the performances. So therefore, we need the local framework, the monitoring facilities, and certification processes. Those are not there in many cases. So therefore, bringing these important, the green or the sustainable activities into our taxonomy, we have a barrier. So therefore, I think one of the important things for both the financial and also the industrial sector is to generate this information, the data, so that in the future, when the next revision, we can bring the important, the more important low-hanging fruits, for example, into our taxonomy, so that we can start from somewhere, to have immediate impact. So therefore, basically, the taxonomy is a very important tool for us, but we have a lot of challenges to operationalize. So that's why I think this type of training and also capacity building, understanding this one, and more discussion between the industry and the financial institution also should come in to come up with a common the activities or the sectors as a priority sector. So therefore, this is a prioritization process. And at the same time, lastly, I want to also indicate that now we have, when you look at the green finance taxonomy, we have what we call the objectives, the environmental objectives that qualify the scope. And also we have guiding principles. And one of the guiding principles, of course, is the substantial contribution. We have to have quantifiable or higher contribution into the environment to qualify. Other important aspect is it should be aligned with our policies. So that's where we also should need a comprehensive understanding of our policies, present policies. For example, we have National Environment Action Plan is there, new environment policies there, NDCs are there. Then we have this the Net Zero Roadmap. And of course, in CBSL also, you have many such new initiatives. The understanding of these are very, very essential to operationalize this green of sustainable financing taxonomy. So I stop there. I think it's a very important area where both financial and industrial sector should look into. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sugitapala. That's a very very detailed answer, and that stress upon the importance of having a well articulated taxonomy and how important it is to have those capacity building programs in place and awareness. So during the recent past, we have had a series of programs, and I'm happy to tell in recent future also with the contribution of Dr. Sugitapala, we are planning to have a taxonomy specific training for the financiers, which will be useful to have to expand your knowledge more on the technical aspects of the taxonomy. So that news will be shared in time to come. So thank you, Dr. Sugitapala. And next, I'll be moving to the banking sector, the mammoth sector of the financial system of the country. So representing Commercial Bank, we have Mrs. Sushara. Sushara representing a bank that has a track record of voluntarily initiating a series of projects into building a sustainable banking institution. What level of engagement would you expect the banking sector to have in promoting sustainable finance in terms of new product developments, which I put in words, new product developments, and also having robust internal processes? Over to you.
Thank you, Dushan. You can hear me?
Yeah, can hear you. Can hear you.
And can see me, right?
Yes.
All right. Okay. Yes. So the finance sector can support sustainable finance in a big way, actually, and the level of engagement of the finance sector in supporting sustainable finance could vary. This will vary depending on, say, regulatory requirements, depending on the commitment of the financial institution itself to sustainability, and also the market demand. This demand could be coming from the customers. It could be even coming from the employees or even other stakeholders like shareholders, vendors, for instance. So when we come to new innovative product development, yes, that is one of the main ways in which the banks could support sustainable financing. And as has been seen in the past and at Commercial Bank and many of the other banking institutions as well, we have all been engaged in promoting products and putting out products that are geared towards maybe a sector. Say it could be a SME sector or a women entrepreneur party or something of that nature, targeting those sectors. And these targeted sectors could be relating to green financing itself. So it could be relating to the activity. It could be green activity related products that are floated in. So that is one way in which the banks have been doing products. And I think not only at Commercial Bank, most of the banks are doing this. And we have seen green loans, green leases, to name a few that have been commonly seen. And in addition to that, structured financing instruments are also seen as a product that has been floated in trying to finance these sectors or these type of activities in sustainable finance. In addition to that, the capital markets also have been tapped into and can be tapped into, and the regulatory framework to facilitate such activities has been put in place. So for instance, the CSE has put in the bond framework, and we also have the taxonomy in place that the CBSL has put in. So we can take those into consideration and come up with the green bonds that could be floated in. In addition to the green bonds, there could be also several other instruments, like, for instance, to the investment banking arms of the banking sectors, maybe equity could be raised in order to finance some of these activities. As was told by Dr. Ma and even Dr. Sugatipala, I think some of these projects are not purely bankable projects and can't be financed with pure bank financing. In order to get these financing done, there has to be a multitude of financing, such as equity, maybe venture capital financing coming in, and then the bank financing also can come in. And maybe if these incentives that were spoken of are given, maybe the proposals could be more bankable, because there are lots of projects out there which in fact are not bankable. So therefore the banks themselves, though they might have the appetite to finance such activities, are constrained due to the fact that they are not in fact bankable. So in order to make them bankable, if there are certain incentives given, that could be one way in which the banks would come in and promote sustainable financing. Having said that, I mean, with the banks having the products and all that in place, it's not necessarily sufficient. You actually need to build up the capacity of the staff and the employees. This is because the ground, or the people who are talking to the customers, are spread across the network. So this message has to be given to the entire network. So the entire network has to be quite educated, and the awareness as to what green financing, blue financing has to be with the people, with the staff. So there has to be a lot of capacity development that has to happen. And with that capacity development, the staff will be able to communicate well with their customers as to the importance of sustainable finance. And that would be one of the ways in which sustainable finance will be taken up by the clients themselves, because there is better awareness and understanding by the customers themselves. Then the banks also could take a role in even having seminars and cluster meetings for targeted sectors of customers, promoting and bringing the knowledge of sustainable finance or some greening activity that would benefit a sector out there into the customer forum, so that they themselves get better aware and are more aware of what these activities are and how they would benefit by undertaking such activities. So those are some of the ways in which sustainable finance could be promoted. And not only that, actually, there are many vendors, experts, suppliers who are in this green space. So the banks have the opportunity of collaborating. And actually, this collaborative approach would be better because you can reach a wider audience and sometimes an audience who, in fact, wants to take up those opportunities. And therefore, if they collaborate, there would be more opportunities to roll out green financing and actually realize some of these projects much faster than that would be otherwise available. Then on the internal processes, one of the things of trying to develop internal processes to gear up for sustainable financing is actually the regulatory framework. I believe Sri Lanka has a good regulatory framework. We have the roadmap, we have the taxonomy, we have a direction that the central bank has issued in terms of giving clear direction to the banking sector and even the finance sector as to this is where we want you to go, this is what we want you to have as regulation or corporate governance or reporting requirements within the organization. So there is clear direction as to what is required from the regulator. So it's now up to the banks and finance companies, in fact, to try to get the groundwork and the systems and reporting structures and all that up to speed in order to try to comply with the direction and regulation that has been given. If that is done, there would be a robust system within the organizations that would automatically promote sustainable financing. Having said that also, I think if I just talk about my organization, Commercial Bank, we actually collaborated with certain experts as well and certain financial institutions in the past. And these DFIs enabled us to be prepared by adopting we adopted some of these principles like the social and environmental framework within the bank early. So it enabled us to inculcate or ingrain it into our credit appraisal systems early so that these enabled us to face the current requirements better. So collaboration with other institutions, other experts, other DFIs is also a good way in which to learn the best practices and try to adopt those best practices within the organizations. So that is also another way in which the internal processes could be developed. They could be costly, but that is one way in which the best practices could be adopted. Then also integrating, as I told earlier, also the environmental and social framework into the business processes, the credit appraisal processes, and the like will also give a better and more robust system to the internal systems in trying to, when we are doing appraisals, automatically that would result in sustainable financing being considered in all aspects of lending. In addition to which, the reporting framework. I think reporting is one way in which it makes it clearer as to where we are. So having a clear reporting framework is important. So ensuring or being able to collect this information and report in certain required manner is also important. I think we've had GRI reporting is something that most banks, I believe, have been engaged in for several years. Commercial, I think even when it was just a guideline, has adopted it, and now we have this GRI reporting framework. But there are multiple frameworks like GRI, TCFD, and there are some others. And we understand that there are two frameworks under the IFRS S1 and S2 that is coming up, and it is likely to be made somewhat compulsory. So I suppose that would be another way in which sustainable finance will get pushed into being adopted, because those reporting frameworks are coming into being, and we may all have to adopt those in going forward. Not only reporting of certain activities. When you go to talk about reporting, not only the numbers in terms of the loans that have been given or how much the outstanding is or commitments are, but also the impact that is being created by the work that is being done by each institution would also be important. So trying to find tools that could calculate and quantify the impact that is being created by our own portfolios will be another important way in which we need to improve on in going forward. So Tushan, these are some of the main aspects that I could think of as being ways in which the banking sector could support sustainable financing in going forward.
Thank you, Sushara. I think your message is quite clear. And as the regulator, as the central bank, we are also watching quite keenly to see the banking sector. So we are banking so much on the banking sector to come up with that groundbreaking idea of sustainable finance in terms of product development, which we hope and we expect will happen in future. So thank you for those insights. And next I would move on to Mr. Dhanuji Jayapala from MAS. So in recent years, various industry sector organizations unveiled their strategies to achieve net zero status in terms of emissions through a series of sustainable activities within their businesses. As a representative of the real sector of the economy, what drives you to be that change as a corporate entity, and how important will it be to have access to sustainable financing products in the market in future? Over to you, Dhanuji.
Thank you, Dushan, and good afternoon for everyone. So yes, I represent apparel industry, and I'm from MAS, which we haven't set as a net zero target. And we are trying to find a way to get there, but we are in a pathway that is aligned with 1.5 degree decarbonization future. So we have annual targets working towards 4.2% absolute reduction. So regardless of our growth, we are targeting to reduce. And this is the common theme for the apparel industry, which all of them are targeting to go and align with 1.5 degree decarbonization level, or to keep the global warming under 1.5 degrees, which is becoming tougher and tougher every day. So from the question, so what drives the industry in general, I think I'll talk about apparel and as well as other industries. So apparel industry, obviously the brands play a huge role, especially I think brands who are working with Sri Lanka has a special outlook on sustainability, and decarbonization is involved, very important to them. So they definitely drive that strategies through their supply chain, which has a huge impact on us. And Sri Lanka is known as sustainable destination for manufacturing. So not just decarbonization, and it's about social and governance aspects as well. But in a broader level, I think anybody who's exporting has the similar exposure to the brands they are working with, and also the other parts of economy, such as development on, software developments as well. But I think one common thing coming across globally is the regulation. So I'll take some time. I think other speakers also took on this task about talking about the importance of transparency. So, so transparency, I think I'll divide it into two levels. First, at entity level, I think there's a lot of regulation very recently came up, such as the EU Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, as well as SEC Security Exchange Commission from US working on the Scope 3 reporting guidelines. And also said by the other speakers, also the IFRS or ISSB's S1 and S2 requirements that are coming on to, which will become mandatory by 2024. So this will definitely drive the first SDG linked reporting as well as carbon disclosure. And another factor that has come in, especially with Germany is the Supply Chain Due Diligence Directive, which requires you to do the due diligence on a supply chain. And this will be expanded into EU legislation probably by 2025. That's the target. Then apart from that, there's a lot of disclosures that's happening on Carbon Disclosure Project or CDP, then TCFD, I think Swara spoke about that. And obviously the GRI, which is mostly used, Sustainable Reporting Initiative. What I'm trying to say is all these initiatives at entity level will have a ripple effect on Sri Lanka's business. And I think the banking sector also relies on some of these indicators to move and get sustainable financing. And I think going a little beyond product level, I think you are seeing a lot of impacts on that as well. I think the biggest one, which probably has a very little impact on Sri Lanka at the moment, but could have a big impact globally, is CBAM, or the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. So CBAM, I think, came into regulation in Europe, Ireland, and I think UK is considering that as well, where your carbon emissions should be reported at the end of the year. And if your carbon emissions are higher than the European manufacturing baselines of manufacturing, you will have to pay a tax. So it's basically a carbon tax on any imports that's coming into Europe. So initial ones are on cement, steel, and aluminium, the 6 categories altogether, which I don't think Sri Lanka has much of an impact, but they will expand these borders. I think especially as an apparel sector, we are watching when it will happen, and because we have a lot of exposure to those areas as well. Then another interesting one, again, I think is on DPP, or Digital Product Passport. That's obviously impacting batteries as well as apparel sector by 2026. And Sri Lanka has huge exposure over there. So that will most probably talk about a product level carbon disclosure. So this is where the world is heading. And also there's a lot of work going on stops reducing the greenwashing. So obviously Europe is also working towards not having or no claims on carbon offsetting also goes into their products that's being used in Europe. So any manufacturing that goes into Europe will have a huge or they have to change the ways of doing it, because to understand offsetting, you basically do a project outside of your work scope and offset the emissions around it. But what will drive this is for you to make sure your own supply chain, your own manufacturing to be much more greener. So then on to the regulation on financing. I think there's a lot talked about green bonds, climate bonds, sustainability linked bonds, and also there's a lot of debt instruments that are coming into the market also on sustainability linked debt instruments as well. Then obviously Sri Lanka introduced the Sri Lankan green taxonomy. Also the EU green taxonomy is also available to identify the projects that are available. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for industry to own. For example, I think the estimation is there's a requirement of $270 trillion of investment required for decarbonization by 2020. So that's roughly about a $10 trillion of investment. And some of them has to happen with developing economies who are currently falling behind. And apart from regulation and all of these needs to happen. I think something has to happen on the consumer side that also drives a lot of behavior who are exporting and also in Sri Lanka as well. So if the consumers ask for better products, better sustainability, obviously that will happen. And we have seen that happen, especially with the automobile sector, that most of the customers are now looking for electric vehicles, which are becoming more and more popular. Like Dr. Ma said, China is now leading the way on that as well. And I think finally, another drive for sustainable finance is seeing the physical impacts of climate change. So I think obviously getting impacted from frequent weather changes of heavy rains to heavy, humid, hot days. I think we had that change within within 1 week. So I think we are seeing the more frequent physical impacts. So I would say this will have a huge impact on supply chain disruption, especially in logistics, as well as on agriculture. Speaking specifically about apparel, I think there's a lot of problems with cotton growing. So that will have a huge business impact, which will need to be managed. So I think those are the main areas that I can talk about what will drive sustainable finance, driving into more and more investment to the industry.
Thank you, Dhanuji. I think you tried to put in all the industry-specific information in the given time. So the thing that I understand is there's so much going on. Some of them is technical and so industry-specific that we may not understand, but still the good news is that you are on it. So you have that drive as the industry sector, which is the good news. So thank you for sharing your wealth of knowledge. And so that will bring the first round of questions to an end. So without much of ado, I will move on to the second round, which is a general question to all the panelists. I expect in respect of time, so to have a very concise and brief answers. So first of all, let me turn to the academic representation on panel, Dr. Sugatapala. So based on all the inputs that you gathered at this forum and through your experience, what are the 2 actions that you would highlight as the key priorities in your respective sectors in gearing up the sustainable finance with an ultimate objective of contributing to the attainment of SDGs as a developing nation? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So I think one of the key is basically we are following global, issues as well as its local contribution, of course, and we have to follow this global framework. So that's in fact the taxonomy is also aligned with that. So therefore, understanding these global developments are very important. So that's one aspect basically. So therefore, these new terminologies are coming up and new even technology developments are coming up. So all we have to capture, and then we have to have up-to-date knowledge on those. That's one thing basically, especially understanding these taxonomies and the tools, the framework, the matrices. It's a bit complex, but that understanding is a mandatory. The second most important thing to me is to localize it. I think sometimes we just try to follow this standard, but most of the time it will fail because always there is a localization aspect. That's a challenge we are having. Like we have to have competency capacity to localize these global frameworks and also the criteria, indicators, and come up with some, these tools which are locally acceptable, having that quality. Of course, we can sacrifice certain level, but not, many. So therefore, localization with quality sound frameworks, the framework, the matrices, the tools, the indicators, everything. Having also a good monitoring, reporting, and verification system. At the end of the day, unless you can prove it, then there's no room for getting further funding. So therefore, it's a mandatory that we have to show exactly that we have achieved the set target. So therefore, monitoring, reporting, and verification is very weak in Sri Lanka. That is something everyone has to concentrate on, and then developing the local, the indicators and frameworks. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sugatipala, for those remarks. And I will pose the same question to Ms. Sushara next. So what are the key priorities in the banking sector as you can identify?
So Dushan, I'm also on the same lines of Dr. Sugatipala. I think what we need to do is we need to get our internal frameworks and our internal systems geared up and ready in order to face to be able to better support the sustainability financing activities. Even if we talk about a green bond, this is not the time to raise green bonds. But we need to have the frameworks in place and ready so that when the market is right, we could actually float a green bond. So getting our act together, getting our systems and policies and gearing the whole system within the banking system to look at sustainability as one of the key priority areas, and all our operations and core business areas aligned with such sustainability being the driving force, I think would be one of the main things that could be done, because then we will have the capacity built up, and then actually we will be able to grow sustainability finance very fast. So we need to get that whole message across the banking network very well, and so that we also get reporting and all those things, as Dr. Sugatipala also said, up to speed. And also there is that gap between the measurable elements and something that could be considered as substantiating that we could rely on, like the frameworks, the standards and things like that, that the banks could have as a supporting documents to support what green financing is, for instance. So those things also need to be in place. But if the banks also have their own framework and own policies and procedures in place, that would really be a good way in which to take it forward. And the other thing that I think the banks could do and work towards making sustainability as a key priority and working towards it is to look at financing SMEs and the underbanked and unbanked and underserved communities as well, and expanding the population of who we support through sustainability financing activities. So this will actually broaden the network of people who we serve and bringing those also into the framework of what we finance, because then we should think differently probably and look at how we can finance maybe differently, how we can finance things without collateral. Maybe we have to do a load of, as I was talking earlier also, we need to collaborate with different financing mechanisms and make projects bankable. So that bankable orientation is also something that we need to look at, how we can make so many projects that are unbankable, bankable in taking it forward. So those are the two key important things. Thanks.
Thank you, Sushara, for those final remarks on the question. And next, I'll turn to Danuji, probably. So in terms of the apparel sector or industry sector as a whole, what are the key priorities on this front, sustainable financing, to gear up sustainable financing in future, as you identify?
I think the most obvious one is having access to better rates through this, if possible. I think we had a discussion about a month ago, I think, about setting up green bonds. I think Dushan and the Still Rukshini was organizing this for the banking sector. I was lucky to be participant. The discussion was in the future, or I think it's likely there won't be any difference. I think the the idea is the other sources of financing to be dried off in the future. So I think until that happens, there should be some concessions on rates. But moving away from that, I think there are certain regulatory unlocks, especially talking about decarbonizations that has to happen at Sri Lanka, not from a CBSL point of view, where I think, for example, if you want to decarbonize, you have to either decarbonize the grid, which obviously the government has a monopoly over it. How can we do that? And if not, it should be given to the private sector, where they can raise finances with the banks and do the projects, right? So for example, if you want to integrate renewable energy, there should be an opportunity given to the private sector to develop large scale renewable energy projects. And this means there's obviously there will be issues with the grid stability. So which means the batteries and other storage has to come. So these are heavy investments and like dark green kind of projects, which has a very high impact, but these needs to happen. And also, I think looking at developing finances, we need to move out from carbon. We call this carbon tunnel vision. So everybody focuses on carbon, but then there are a lot of other SDG areas that Sri Lanka can contribute, like clean water, sustainable cities, equality areas. So, and have more transparency on that. So that I think it would allow the industry sector to get more and more financing to themselves and develop within Sri Lanka.
Thank you, Dhananjay, for this remarks. And last but not least, let me turn to the central bank. My boss, Ms. Dilrukshini, to close the second round. So I will pose the same question to you also. So as the regulator, as the central bank, what are the two key priorities that you identify in the present moment as an incentive to gear up the sustainable financing in time to come? Over to you.
Yeah, Dushan. Thank you for that question. But, I will basically focus our priority on three main things. First thing is, that the roadmap is quite, outdated now. We developed it in 2017, and we launched it in 2019. But the market, by the time we developed the roadmap, it was, the actions which were there were very new to the market. But now what I understand is the financial sector has leaped commendably. So we need to revisit our roadmap and see what kind of dynamism we can bring into the roadmap. So that is there. That is what is on my plate now. And the other thing is, Dushan, I think you know that the SBFN they have come up with a new toolkit for roadmap development. So we can see the toolkit and identify gaps in our roadmap, because as Dr. Sugathapala very clearly said, you have to get these frameworks ready. Because the frameworks make you go run extra mile. And then the other thing is capacity development, which we were continuously doing. But it has to, we have to pitch this capacity development into a next level, so which we are planning to do in coming November and maybe again in January, with Dr. Sugathapala entirely focusing on taxonomy, and then IPSF funding us on another capacity development program, especially on products. And then the next, most difficult aspect is incentivizing, Dushan. We all know that the country situation, and so as the regulator, we will look at what kind of regulatory forbearance we can introduce for incentivizing green financing. And the other thing, I saw a few questions, because what I have to say, when you raise some funding, like, very recently DFCC raised funding from Global Climate Fund. But the thing is this, for any bank or any financial institution to raise these funding from abroad, they have to have these frameworks ready. I mean, and then the, then only you get the international acceptance. So that is there. So that is one of our priorities. With the restructuring, debt restructuring process being over, I think these banks and other financial institutions can tap the international market for obtaining some financing arrangements for financing, green financing, related projects. So that is there. Then I understand that we need some, as Shushara Danuji said, because first and foremost, this, hard green or co-green project, like, how we are going to green our grid, that is a topmost priority at the moment. So that has to come from some private sector facilitation. So that is something that I think at the president's office, they're looking at how to make the energy more sustainable. So that is there. I think that would be one of the national priorities. But when come to central bank as the regulator, so our priorities, we are to revisit the roadmap and then focus on capacity development and think of how we are going to incentivize the financial sector. In addition to that, I think the financial sector participants, they also should know. Now we know that they are basically in some banks, few banks have gone for green deposits. When you take green deposit, that has to be matched with one-to-one matching should be there for green lending. So likewise, if you raise funding through a corporate bond, green bond, because we know that the framework is ready with the the regulator. So then that funding has to be basically one-to-one to be matched with the sustainable project, green project. So that requirement is there. I think I answered your question.
Thank you, Madam, for the insights from the regulator's point of view. So with that, we are coming to the end of the panel questions, and now the floor will be open for Q&A. And I see a few questions have been posted on chat, and one of which has been answered already by Dr. Sugatapala. Thank you for that. Also, Adisha has posted a question to Dr. Ma. Unfortunately, Dr. Ma had to leave for another forum. So if you have any questions specifically for any of the panelists or in general to the panel, now you may raise your hand and voice it out, or maybe you can post it on the chat. So we have about 7 to 10 minutes of the scheduled time for the Q&A. So it's the time for you to post your questions. So there's a question on the chat, which is on the obtaining certification for ESG and taxonomy adopted by a company. And it asks about any programs available and how to apply. So from the central bank's side, I can say that our training Center for Banking Studies and in Macroprudential Surveillance Department, we are collaborating in bringing in a few more training programs on the area. So if you register with the Center for Banking Studies, and they will share the calendar, the event calendar with you, and then you can apply for all of these trainings, which would be either in person or virtual. But you can use that facility, and there are many other training programs organized by different regulatory institutions and also private sector as well. So you have to be on alert, and there's so many knowledge sharing and capacity building going on at the moment.
Dushan, maybe we can start with the questions which is in the Q&A option on Zoom, which are already been posted.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So I'll start with, yes, so this could be directed to Mrs. Dilrukshini. Why can't regulator encourage banks to raise tier 2 capital through sustainable finance instruments instead of using conventional debt instruments such as debentures? Is there a restriction in Basel framework or policies? This was posted by Gishan Ilangakon.
I think because, I earlier said, if you are going for a green bond issue, that has to be matched 1-to-1 with whatever the project that you have identified. So that is definitely not for capital generation. So that is out of purview.
And then another attendee has posted a question asking, does country's credit rating affect its ability to raise financing through instruments like green bonds? So at the moment, sovereign is unable to issue any sovereign bonds, but for private bonds, the corporate bonds, of course, the credit rating would matter so much. And as well, you must be knowing the SEC and the CSC, they have issued the green bond framework with the assistance of ADB, but so far there have not been any corporate bond issuances listed on CSC. So there's so much potential in time to come.
No, Dushan, what they ask is whether they can go global. I think because, with the sovereign rating downgrade and the restructuring, debt restructuring is going on. This is not the time, but after the restructuring is over, basically when the rating of the sovereign plus the rating of the banking sector is improved, definitely country can go to international capital markets to raise funding for greening.
Thank you, Mr. Dilrukshini. And another question again could be addressed by the central bank. Sustainable Finance and Integrated National Financing Framework, INFF. Actually, the question is not clear. So it says INFF should go hand to hand, otherwise it won't serve the purpose. So your question is sort of incomplete. If you can post the question again, please. I'll move on to the next question. It says, is there a timeline for social and governance aspect to be integrated to the taxonomy? Maybe Mrs. Dilrukshini can give an answer.
But I really don't know why that has come from an anonymous attendee. You can introduce yourself and ask the question. But since the question is being raised, sovereign green bond framework is almost finalized. So as I said, for any sovereign issue, we will have to wait until the debt restructuring matter is sorted out.
Yes, yeah, that is the answer for the question on the green bond framework.
I think, Dushan, I think we don't have any more questions. If any, attendee just want to raise a question, they can raise. As one person has raised their hand, you can just, someone has raised their hand.
Yes, Mr. Prabhat Singh, now he can speak.
Please, please go ahead. Any more questions that will be from the audience, please?
I think, Dushan, we can find out.
Yes. Yeah. If not, we can bring the session to a close and we'll hand over the controls to Kushan. And before that, I would like to thank the panelists for joining for today's discussion and spending their most valuable time for close to more than 2 hours. And thank you. And I will hand over the controls to Kushan.
Yes, thank you very much, Kushan. And I'd like to express my gratitude for the richness of the content in the discussion. I believe our viewers have gained valuable insights. So thank you once again for starting the discussion in an engaging and compelling manner, Dushan. So with that, we are about to conclude today's high-level seminar. So on behalf of Center for Bank Studies of Central Bank of Sri Lanka, let me express our gratitude to all the contributors of the event today. Mrs. TMJYP Panandu, Senior Deputy Governor of Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Thank you very much for gracing this event and delivering opening remarks today. And our sincere gratitude should go to Dr. Marjun, Mrs. W. Dilrukshini, Dr. Sugatapala, Ms. Sushara Vidyasagara, and Mr. Danuji Jayapal for their invaluable contribution for this high-level seminar. We very well understand that each of you sort of maintains a very demanding time schedule, but thank you very much for taking the time to be part of this initiative. And on a separate note, CBS is thankful for Ms. Dilukshini and her staff for providing necessary knowledge resources for putting things together for the high-level seminar. And thank you very much to all the viewers who joined with us via Zoom and Facebook, who made this event a success. So Central Bank Studies, CBS is committed to organizing future events that explore into timely and pertinent topics. I look forward to continuing these insightful discussions. Thank you very much and have a good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kushan. Thank you,
madam.
everyone.
Thank you.